So it's not just the thought, right? But it's a thought that you considered to be true. And once you consider a thought to be true, you get to live that thought. This is very important because this is how our everyday, normal, typical experience turns into suffering. A thought occurs, right? It's just a thought. When you practice meditation, at some point, if you get to the point where you're experiencing the truth, which is I am the awareness, right? Which I am the awareness. And when I am the awareness and a thought arises in that awareness that says, you know, this is difficult, you see the thought as a thought, not a fact. Thoughts are never facts, they're interpretations. And those interpretations are a function of your conditioning. You know? Where does the thought that this is difficult come from? Comes from your prior experience in trying to do anything you don't know how to do. And then you say, this is difficult, right? But the difficulty exists nowhere other than in the thought. There is no, can anybody show me difficulty? Difficulty is constituted in thought. It doesn't exist anywhere except in thought. Yeah? But if you have the thought, this is difficult, and you're attached to believing thoughts, right? If you've got a bad habit of believing all the thoughts that arise in your awareness, right? Then you're going to be suffering a lot, right? Because all the thoughts, most of the thoughts that occur in your awareness are going to come from your previous experience, right? And so it's going to always be comparing things that are happening now to what happened then, right? So anything that you do now, right, that occurs to you not to be easy or occurs to you that you are learning it and you're still new at it, right? That will bring back anything that happened in the past like that, right? So if you were a little kid and you were the last person like I was to get picked for the baseball team, right? Baseball was hard for me, right? So that's in there, right? So that gets registered as a collective and generalized reality that anything that's like that is difficult and uncomfortable too, because it was uncomfortable too. So you see, it's all mechanical. It's all mechanical. You know, a button gets pushed and a tape plays in your head. And when the tape plays in your head, if you believe that that tape is an accurate reflection of reality, right, then you get to suffer. It's as simple as that. And if you believe that you are a person that's aware instead of the awareness itself, you get to suffer the life of a person. It's as simple as that. If you get to believe that, if you believe that you're a physical body, right, then whatever happens to the body happens to you. And there's always going to be uncomfortable situations occurring in the body, especially as you get older, right? So, now, you have to understand something. When I say if you believe the body is you, you may say, well, what am I supposed to believe? How am I supposed to function, right? Well, how you're supposed to function and what you're supposed to believe has to do with what's real and true, okay? So if you're not the body, it doesn't mean that you walk around experiencing experiencing bodilessness. You know, you can't do that, right? You've got to deal with the fact that even though you know you're not the body, you intentionally identify with the body because it's the vehicle you have to use to move around in time and space. That's all. So you're not really the body, but you're intentionally identifying with it for practical reasons. You're not your car either, but you identify with your car because without it, you don't have any transportation. Right? You're not your body, but you identify with your body because without it, you don't have any transportation, right? There is a story, though, a Zen story, where the student says to the master, how do I escape the fire of the suffering of life? How do I escape the fire of the suffering of life? And the master says, by jumping into the flames. By jumping into the flames. By surrendering to the experience. Because if you're experiencing your true nature, there's no threat. There is no threat. There is no threat of anything happening, even death. There is no threat. You don't avoid, in these teachings, what you're being taught, right? If you really want to be a student of these teachings, what you're being taught is anything that you're afraid of, anything that's uncomfortable, go toward it. Don't go away from it, go toward it. Because if you go toward it, you get to practice the truth, which is that it can't harm you. And you have to expose yourself to it to experience that. If you keep running from it, you'll never get to experience the truth. Right? All right, so let me just go over the technique a little bit. Okay, very simple technique. The technique is not the issue. The issue is consistent practice of the technique, right? That's the challenge, because the personality gets involved, right? And it doesn't see the point. Personality doesn't consider this to make any sense. It's not going to get anything. It's not going to get anything out of this. We're not doing this to get anything. We're not doing this to gain anything or lose anything. Why? Because the nature of the experience of the awareness that is our true nature doesn't gain anything or lose anything ever. Ever. Right? So in the practice of meditation, you're not going to gain anything, you're not going to lose anything. You're simply going to experience your true nature. You're simply going to experience being the awareness that's aware of the body breathing. That's the thing. When you're aware of the body breathing, right, take the next step right there. I am being. That's why I say it in a very specific way, because I'm trying to get it as clear and pure as possible. I am being aware of the body breathing, right? I am the being. The being is the awareness of the body breathing. If I just say I'm watching my breath, do you see how that corrupts it right away? I'm watching my breath. Who is it that's watching the breath, right? It's going to be the person watching the breath. And it's going to be, I'm watching my breath. It's not your breath, right? So we want to purify it, right? We want you to practice as clearly and purely as possible. So when you move your attention away from the thought activity, I am the being, I am awareness, aware of the body breathing. I am awareness, aware of the body breathing. That's actually what's happening. That's actually what's happening. And you want to practice that because the point of meditation is that the awareness aware of the body breathing can be the awareness that's aware of anything that's happening and not be affected. And that's freedom. That's what's possible. So the technique, you want to do the technique the way it's meant to be done, right? Don't cheat on the technique. If you do, you're not going to get any benefit from the experience of practicing meditation. So the feet are flat on the floor. The hands can be resting on the thighs, or you can use a mudra where you have one hand, one palm rests in the other palm, and you touch your thumbs to create a circle, and then just let that sit in your lap. So the back is straight, the shoulders release and drop. The weight of the body falls into the chair. And we're sitting in such a way that we can let go of the weight of the body. We don't have to hold on. Let the body be natural, relaxed, still. And then we start to pay attention to attention. We place our attention about an inch below the navel. This is called the hara, or the dantian. It's the center of energy in the body. And we're just going to watch the body breathe, be the awareness of the body breathing. And as we're aware of the body breathing, at some point a thought will arise. And because of our habit of thinking, as a primary way of being in the world is thinking, because that's our habit, when a thought arises, the attention will go back to thinking, and you'll be thinking. As soon as you notice you're thinking, gently bring the awareness back to the belly breathing, being aware of the belly breathing, watching the belly expand when you inhale and collapse when you exhale. Like a balloon blows up and deflates. And you just stay aware, be the awareness of the body sitting here breathing. And again, a thought will come and pull your attention back to the thought activity. As soon as you notice that, you bring it back, gently bring it back to the belly breathing. Now, this is a practice. Okay? That means that you may sit for a period of time and experience a lot of thinking and very little awareness of the body breathing. That's fine. That's perfect. This is not a performance. You're not trying to demonstrate anything. You're practicing being aware of the body breathing. Other times you may practice and spend a lot of time aware of the body breathing without much thinking, right? Doesn't matter. Doesn't matter, because what you're practicing is relocating your identity to the awareness. That's what you're practicing. And it takes time for that to happen. The other thing that's important when you're doing the practice is to allow everything to be as it is. If the thought arises that something should be different, you just see that as a thought and continue to watch the body breathe, be the awareness of the body breathing. If you hear a sound in the next room, you just notice the sound. You don't try and resist it. You don't think anything's wrong or it's a distraction. And you just come back to the body breathing. Being relaxed physically, allowing the mind to calm down by moving attention away from the mind's activity and just being aware of awareness itself. So we'll begin a practice. I'll ring a bell. I'll keep track of the time so you don't have to think about time. If you find yourself waiting, go back to the practice. Don't wait. Just relax. The meditation's already happening. All you have to do is notice it and allow it to be so. Well, you can use language to talk about it, but what you're talking about, it isn't it. You can only use language to point to it, but what you're talking about isn't it. If I say you're aware, that's why earlier I was trying to clean that up, right? But in regular language that we normally use, in conventional language, that's the way it's going to come out of your mouth, right? But you can be clear that even though you're saying it that way, that what you're talking about is the awareness is aware. It's the only possibility. The personality can't be aware because the personality occurs in awareness. Personality can't be aware because the personality doesn't exist other than a thought activity. And so we're trying to clean that up. We're trying to get away from living in a dream. We're trying to get away from living an experience that is a dream experience. The personality is a dreamt entity. The personality is a dreamt entity. It doesn't actually exist. Right? So this is what we're practicing to do, is to be able to be awake consistently, to see that a dream is a dream, to see that a thought is a thought. Right? The difference when you're awake is there will still be thinking, right? But you'll know that thinking is happening when it's happening. You won't think you're the thinker doing the thinking. You're aware of thinking happening, but you'll stop thinking that you're the thinker doing the thinking, right? However, when you're using thinking to do work, to do practical things, right? Then you intentionally identify with the thinking. Just like I said about the body. You're not the body, but you identify with the body, right? Because that's a practical reality, to identify with the body. But it's not true, right? You can know that it's not true and still identify with it intentionally, right? You can know that thinking is thinking and still use it and identify with it when you're using it to do realistic, practical things. When that's not the case, right? Then the way you relate to it is, I am not thinking, right? Thinking is just happening, and I'm aware of the thinking. And I'm aware that the thinking is occurring, and I'm going to pay attention to the thinking, because when I believed everything that I thought, it caused suffering. But if I'm aware of thinking, right, the awareness has discretion. The awareness sees things as they are. It sees thinking as thinking. And so when it sees thinking as thinking, and it sees emotions for what they are, which is a reactive energy that got stimulated, right? When you see these things for what they are, right, the effect they have on you changes. It's just a thought. I don't have to follow it. It's not a fact. I don't have to follow it. You can begin to see your beliefs in operation and thinking. Your beliefs in operation and thinking. You can begin to notice how when a strong emotion occurs, right, that until you're awake, until you've been practiced enough, when a strong emotion occurs, it takes you. It takes you, doesn't it? Yeah. If the fear is strong enough, it takes you. If the anger is strong enough, it takes you, right? But when you wake up and you can now look at it instead of identify with it, instead of be it, right? It can be very strong and still not take you. In fact, when it's very strong, right, one of the things that you will understand, when it's very strong, pay close attention. Because when the anger is very strong, you're probably going to do stupid shit. Right? So if the anger is very strong, that should be a red flag. If the anger is very strong, you should pay close attention to these thoughts and to the energy of the emotion that is compelling. It wants you to do something. You know, the fear wants you to either attack or run. It's very compelling, right? But if you're awake when that's happening, right, and you're dealing with somebody that you love, that you're now enraged with, right, and you understand that if I let that use my mouth, there's going to be a lot of suffering going on, right? But if I don't let that use my mouth and I just watch it run, right, and I stay tuned in to what my intention is to have my relationship work. My intention is not to be in conflict with the people that I'm close to and that I love. My intention is to have the relationship work. So if I want to have the relationship work, I have to be diplomatic, right? That's what's missing in the in Gaza and what's missing in the Middle East. No diplomacy, right? It's all pure rage, pure reaction, you know, pure destructive energy, right? And so you need to be diplomatic in your life. You need to be able to see what you're experiencing, not blindlessly follow it. See what you're experiencing and then look at the situation that exists, right? Right? Be aware of what your intention is and then look to see what's possible. You see, that whole process doesn't even exist if you're being run by the thoughts and the emotions. But if the thoughts and emotions aren't running the show anymore, you can use seeing to look and see what's happening here, what is my intention, and if I want peace, if I want to have a peaceful relationship with the person I'm dealing with, then I'm going to be diplomatic. I'm going to choose the words that I use. I'm not going to speak in, you know, I'm not going to scream. I'm not going to act out, right? I'm going to look to see what will work here. And the possibilities that I now see weren't available to me before. I couldn't see those possibilities, right? Because I was lost in the sauce. Yeah, I was identified with how I feel and what I thought. That was running the show 100%. And that comes from my past experience. So that's not necessarily relevant at all to what's going on right now. And if I keep living my life that way, there's going to be a lot of suffering and a lot of conflict and a lot of dysfunction, a lot of unworkability. That has to be seen very clearly. You have to understand that and see that very clearly because the practice of meditation requires consistency, requires that you do it every day and you do it the way it's meant to be done. And the motivation to do that comes from understanding that if you don't, you're going to suffer. If you don't, you're not going to see things clearly. If you don't, you're not going to be healthy. And if you don't, you're not going to experience well-being. What's well-being? Satisfaction, happiness, peacefulness, and clarity. It's available at all times when you're experiencing the truth of yourself as the awareness. That's well-being, yeah. It's not only possible, it is the truth, that it is not hard. That's the thing that makes it hard, right? Because you're practicing doing nothing, and the personality doesn't know how to do nothing. So the personality tries to do nothing, it just gets frustrated, right? Can't do it. I can't do this. This is difficult, right? Yeah, that's because you're trying to do something that's already happening and all you have to do is tune into it. You don't have to do anything. Meditation is happening all the time. It's happening all the time. You're never not meditating. You're never not meditating, but you don't know that because you're paying attention to something else. It's as simple as that. Oh, if you experience no thinking, that's one of the experiences that you have when you practice meditation. Yeah, no thinking.
There was nothing there.
Yeah, because you see what happens in meditation, if you do it where it's meant to be done and you do it consistently, you will have glimpses. There will be moments of no thinking, right? And when there's moments of no thinking, you're experiencing the awareness. without any disturbed thoughts, without any distractions from it. You're experiencing awareness. Now, you're never ever going to be able to experience that consistently, right? But you can know about it and know that the experience of it is happening all the time, even when you're paying attention to other things. It's happening all the time. So the practice of it, through practicing it, right, you can have a more consistent experience of it, right? But it's impossible to, if you're going to experience it all the time, you disappear, literally, right? So in order to stay in the world, you know, you have to intentionally identify with the physical body. You have to intentionally play the game of space and time in order to stay in the world, right? But you can do that as what you actually are. You don't have to believe that you're actually the body. You can simply choose to identify with it because that works. But if you believe that you're actually the body, then you're into suffering. If you believe your thoughts without looking at them to see if they're realistic and useful, right, then there's going to be suffering. If you look at thoughts and you see whether they're realistic and useful, there won't be suffering. And that's what this is about. This is about not suffering. So, and if you're not suffering, what becomes available is well-being. If you're not suffering, what becomes available is being satisfied, happy, peaceful, and experiencing clarity, because that's the natural state. It's called the natural state because it's natural. Nothing has to happen for that to be so. That's what natural means. Nothing has to happen for that to be so, right? But we're so conditioned to believe that something has to happen for that to be so. So we keep trying to make something happen that doesn't need to happen for that to be so. And when you give that up, when you surrender and stop trying to do anything and just sit there and relax and allow yourself to notice, right, then meditation is happening. It was already happening, and now you're being the meditation instead of thinking about it or practicing it or doing it or anything else. You're being the meditation. Meditation is a state of being. So when you're meditating, you're being meditation. Kabish?